past decade has experienced a wave of live-action fairy tale movies. From Mirror Mirror to Snow White and the Huntsman to Disney's array of adaptations of their classic Disney princess films. However, since 2015's Cinderella, Disney has struggled to costume their princesses in a way which resonates with the audience. By contrast, the TV series Once Upon a Time, which takes fairy tales and intertwines their stories, has created truly imaginative and rich wardrobes for their characters. In this video, I'm going to break down why I love Once Upon a Time's approach to costuming live-action fairy tales, especially in contrast to the Disney princess adaptations which followed. My name is Ellie-Jean. I help women to dress for their unique type of beauty, and I explore costumes from your favourite shows, films, and celebrities. What do I like about Once Upon a Time costumes? To begin with, there are two variations of each character. The original premise of Once Upon a Time is there is a fairy tale kingdom called the Enchanted Forest, where all of the fairy tale characters we know, their lives are intertwined with each other. They all know each other, they're from the same place. There are also other realms like Wonderland, Camelot, which can be travelled between. These people are cursed to come to our world and live as people on Earth with no memory of their fairy tale background, but they keep their kind of fairy tale personalities. So Snow White, for instance, becomes a primary school teacher called Mary Margaret. Our principal characters are Snow White and Prince Charming, the evil queen Regina, Rumpelstiltskin, also known as the Dark One. I would say as an extension of Rumpelstiltskin, Belle is also a main character because Rumpelstiltskin is also the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. So Belle as such, because Rumpelstiltskin is so important to the story, Belle also sticks around quite a lot. But also, principal character is Emma, who is the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming, and also her son, Henry. Both Emma and Henry grew up in our world, Emma as an orphan and Henry as the adopted child of Regina. And together they try and break the curse once they understand that it exists. So as such, we get a translation of these characters' personal styles from really formal, very extreme, fairy tale historical to the real world, and we see how their style gets translated. I think it's really fascinating. For example, my favourite example is Regina, the evil queen. In fairy tale land, you can see that her star routes are mountain, fire, and moon. Mountain is the formality. She dresses in very royal styles, a lot of styles that are influenced from our kind of like our Tudor era, you could argue, a little bit later as well, but also your kind of 1700s inspired pieces. And that's very mountain. She wants to appear powerful and extreme and exaggerated in a very formal way. Her fire, she often dresses very sensual in her colours. She'll often incorporate pieces of lace, have form-fitting silhouettes. And lastly, in fairy tale land, we see Regina lean on moon as her third star route. She has a lot of darkness in her outfits, a lot of edginess. She's often wearing leather, sort of crocodile skin inspired leather, spikes, and very dangerous looking jewels, things like that. Whereas in the real world, that moon route disappears and gets replaced for mushroom. And because I think we can read Regina as someone who really values power, and in our world, someone like the ruler of a town here, you wouldn't expect to see them in kind of edgy gothic styles because you don't rule out of fear. Necessarily in our world, you have to have an element of diplomacy, and that's what that mushroom conveys. So we see her play with that last star route. She doesn't really embrace, you know, that true self in our world because she knows it won't help her. So it's very interesting seeing that translation of what is a powerful queen in a fairy tale context and what is a powerful queen within our world. If I were a fairy tale character, fighting off bandits, escaping the evil witch with my prince, casting spells, you know what I would want? Comfortable shoes. This video is sponsored by Vivaia, which I am particularly excited about because the shoe that is the most versatile in my wardrobe is this pair of Vivaia shoes that I've had for over a year now. You can see that on my wardrobe planning app index, I have styled these over 80 times. They are the shoe that I reach for whenever I'm walking somewhere but I still want to look cute. And one of the main reasons for that is they are extremely comfortable. Vivaia has kindly sent me 3 new pairs of shoes to try to add to my collection. The first is the Miley. This is a ballet shoe where you can change the laces, so they are completely customizable. I have a pair of cream laces and silver laces. I think they are so cute, and I have styled them as Mary Margaret with a cute cardigan and a midi skirt, and I thought she would die to have a pair of ballet shoes in her wardrobe like this. One of the best things about vivaia shoes is they really think about the user. So this pair, for example, is soft and foldable, so they're perfect for traveling. And this is the best bit, they are machine washable. So if you get them dirty, which I do all the time living in the countryside, you can literally just throw them in the washing machine. They are also padded to make them extra comfy. As someone with scoliosis, getting a pair of comfortable shoes is not only important, but near on impossible for me. Shoes do not last very long in my wardrobe. I'm very heavy-footed on my right foot as a result of my spine curvature. So these shoes have been worn the most in my wardrobe. They're extremely resilient and there's not a tear on them, and they're just brilliant to walk on and they last a long time. So I can definitely attest to their durability. The next shoe they sent me was the Clio. This is essentially a slider, and look at the cute butterfly details. I thought these were so fairy tale and they were one of the things that inspired this whole video. I decided to put these with my beautiful Ted Baker midi skirt. I thought this was very princess vibes, but the shoes kind of bring them into a modern realm, which is one of my favorite things I'm doing with my outfits at the moment, taking fairy tale inspiration and adding something cool with it. This is something I did with Alison Bornstein, actually kind of taking that inspiration that I love and making it into an outfit I would really wear, and I think the sliders really help with that. These have a moisture wicking insole, so if you have problematic feet like I do, they can really help with that. They also are anti-slip, which is perfect for me as someone who is notoriously clumsy and fully expects to trip down the aisle in 2 weeks. And they also have the press insole that Vivaia is known for, making them super comfy. The last pair of shoes they sent me is the Addison. These are a kitten heel. They are extremely comfortable. They are also padded on the insole. These, just like the Miley, are foldable, so perfect for traveling again. And as someone with really skinny ankles, I particularly appreciate that you can adjust the strap. Why do all shoes not have this? All the backs of shoes fall off my feet. I've actually started wearing 3s, which are too small for me, just so they will cling to the back of my foot. But I don't need to with these because I can actually adjust the strap. I decided to pair this with my hair, which you have seen featured throughout this video, with the purple florals, as well as my favourite summery dress, which I thought was just very Snow White. These shoes are amazing. As I say, they're one of my favourite brands and I wear their shoes all the time in my own wardrobe and I absolutely love them. They're comfortable, stylish, they go with everything, and I just think they're really innovative and I really appreciate that in a brand. So make sure to use the screen for a discount. The link is on screen and in the description. Thank you so much to Vivaia for supporting this channel. Something else I love about Once Upon a Time is the interpretations are not overly literal. Especially to begin with, I think as we go through the series, we see more recognizably Disney-inspired characters, and I like that a lot less. I like having those little nods to Disney, but I find it a bit boring and a bit lazy when they start to rely on it. But especially early on, the series is quite detached from the Disney fairy tales. It's there, but it's not so extreme. For example, Belle, for instance, gets lots of costumes, but she does get a gold dress. And it's a really beautiful dress, much better executed, I would argue, than Emma Watson's in the Disney Beauty and the Beast. It's a lot richer in colour, the fabric looks more luxurious and expensive, but I think Snow White, obviously being one of our principal protagonists, gets such a rich wardrobe. When we see her with the dwarfs, we see she has a red ribbon, which is obviously a nod to the Disney Snow White, but up until this point, in the castle, we see Snow White in white dresses. We see her in a lot of maternity looks, which are so fun, with empire waists and nods to her tummy and beautiful flowing fabrics. I love seeing like a historical maternity look. I think they do it really well. But none of them are notably like Disney Snow White, and we get such a range of looks. We also see Snow White in the forest trying to fend for herself in these incredible costumes, which remind me a lot actually of, and I'm going to come on to this, but they remind me a lot of Emilia Clarke's warrior looks in Game of Thrones, because both of these women, Ginnifer Goodwin and Emilia Clarke, have the same medium short round body type. But she gets such an array of looks which expand on the Disney story, and I think they're extremely well done. And finally, which I have just touched on, something I love about Once Upon a Time's storytelling when it comes to costumes, is they reflect the actors and actresses really well. I'm actually going to start with some of the male characters. Someone in my comments noted how Rumpelstiltskin, the actor who plays him, is a gamine, and so in the real world we often see him in very gamine and dramatic inspired looks. Very neat, sharp suits with some colour contrast, which feels really harmonious against him and makes him feel even more powerful. I would also say Hook, who has a lot of dramatic essence, a lot of classic and natural essence, maybe even a touch of romantic. That reflects so well into his pirate costume. You believe that he's a pirate. It feels so true because that costuming reflects his essence so well. The leathers, the slightly relaxed way that everything is just like slung on, the distress in the fabric, but also the leather and the power of the shirts and so on is quite dramatic. So that's done so well and he just fits that role. My mic died, so this actually is a different day. I hope that's not too jarring. I'm just gonna carry on. Mary Margaret is dressed very Gameenish, which limits her because although there is a touch of Gameen in Ginnifer Goodwin's features, she mostly has soft, rounded features. So when she's put in things like turtlenecks, collared shirts, stiff poplin fabrics, it really limits her because there is no sharpness in her features to reflect that kind of sharpness in her clothing. And as a result, there's a lack of harmony there. And someone in the comments said that her haircut was Regina's personal vendetta, which I kind of love. I personally don't think it's that bad, the pixie cut, because there is some element of pixiness to her features, but I will say it's certainly not as complimentary as the longer, softer, more flowing hair. With that said, it kind of suits Mary Margaret's personality, and you could argue that she isn't meant to be quite herself, especially in the beginning, so that's why it feels a little off. However, they keep dressing her that way. In fact, I would say it gets worse the longer the series goes on, so I don't think you could argue that. But as Snow, Ginnifer Goodwin is dressed fantastically in a way which really complements her soft rounded body type. Emma, played by Jennifer Morrison, has classic, ethereal and natural essences. She has a quite timeless look. She's often typed as either a soft natural or a soft classic in Kibby. People tend to put her somewhere between the two, and that's because she has this classic and natural mix. I originally identified her last essence as ingenue, but actually I disagree with that after I had a couple of comments saying, doesn't she have ethereal? I really agree with you. I think you're right. I completely missed that. I saw this element of softness, but actually that softness is less sweet, but kind of ageless, which is why those more sweet princessy details feel more costumey against her, whereas something more flowing feels really right with her. There is natural and classic in her typical Emma Swan outfit. The leather is quite natural. There's something quite earthly about it, but the silhouette itself is quite classic, bar the skinny jeans, which are obviously just kind of on trend at the time of making this series. But in general, the kind of semi-fitted leather jacket, the simplicity, there is a lack of extreme detail in anything that she wears. All of this complements the classic in her features. I would also say that Jennifer has a medium body type. She really reminds me of Jennifer Aniston, where she has a touch of width, but she's neither particularly soft nor particularly sharp. She leans maybe slightly soft, but she's definitely somewhere in the middle, and also she looks neither tall nor short. Someone else whose character style reflects the actress really well is Ruby. Ruby is Little Red Riding Hood, aka Red. She is also the wolf. I love their reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood. When we first meet Ruby, she's in lines which feel quite forced against her, kind of small skirts, crop tops, which goes against the length and sharp lines in her silhouette. When she finds her confidence through Emma, her clothing noticeably changes, and these lines, such as the checkered shirt, feel much more harmonious with her more straight and long body type. Obviously, there is an element to this as well, which implies that she was looking for attention with the more revealing clothes, and then she doesn't need that anymore, and she shifts to kind of less revealing, more covered up clothes in a kind of semi-misogynistic way of telling that story, which works, but obviously is quite basic, and I don't think you would see it done in such a simplistic way now. I think there'd be more of a complicated exploration of Ruby's choice of clothing now. But also, that doesn't negate the fact that the original lines do feel forced against her longer body type, and the second set of clothing actually are more harmonious with the actress's figure. Regina is such the perfect example of this. I think she is dressed impeccably throughout the show, as both Storybrooke Regina and as Queen Regina. She has either a narrow or medium straight body type, so she's got medium vertical line, straight lines in her frame. I'm more inclined to say narrow than medium because the very narrow silhouettes, such as like pencil skirt dresses, very structured, tight dresses with tight necklines, do look really, really, really good, but I could see an argument for her being medium as well. Let's say narrow for the sake of this. Her essences are also dramatic, classic, romantic, which are quite an easy translation of the style roots conversation we had earlier as well. So a lot of what I said applies here. Her lines are quite simple and minimal for classic. There is a touch of structure and sharpness and boldness for her dramatic, and a certain sensuality for her romantic essence. So should Disney's live actions do what Once Upon a Time has done? Just because I like the costuming and the method of costumes in Once Upon a Time doesn't mean that I think this is exactly what Disney should do with their live action movies. In Once Upon a Time, the world feels very real, very 3D, modern sometimes, and you're aware that it's acted. It feels a little bit cheap at points. Because it's a TV show, you can't expect it to be, it's not trying to be a Game of Thrones, it's trying to be something that teenagers probably would watch. So it doesn't need that kind of very expensive, deep, rich costuming and like world building, visual world building. It doesn't need that because you're watching it mostly for the story and the reimagining of the fairy tales rather than how are they going to bring them to life. It's a part of it, and they do it really well for the kind of media that it is. It doesn't pretend to be a serious show. It knows it's fun, it knows it's having a good time. It doesn't try too hard to make the CGI look believable, and it doesn't have to, and you don't need it to enjoy the show. But they don't make the costumes boring. They do have lots of rich, interesting takes on what that character's costume and clothing and wardrobe might actually look like and how it might be used. It doesn't just, which is what Disney's doing, take the original cartoon and reimagine it in a non-beautiful way, just bring it into the real world. The reason they can afford to be a little bit more cheap than I would expect for the Disney live actions is because you are watching it for the story. You're watching it for what is going to happen next. When you watch a Disney live action, you actually know the story and you're not watching it for that. You're pretty much watching it for nostalgia and to imagine this beautiful cartoon that you grew up watching. Cartoon, is that the right word? This beautiful animation that you grew up watching becoming real and becoming beautiful. All that beauty that you loved as a child, you want to see reflected in a real world context. And they have stopped delivering that. The Disney live actions, especially the Disney princess ones, should be beautiful. They should be romantic. They should be extremely detailed. They should have a kind of vintage feel to them. They should feel classic. They should not feel like you can see the seams. They should not feel like you're watching a play. It should feel real completely, and it should be really immersive, because as much as it is for children to an extent, the live actions mostly are catered for this wave of nostalgia that we're having, where people want to reconnect with the past, and therefore they're essentially for adults, and they're for adults that loved these stories and they want to see them be beautiful. At the same time though, at least Once Upon a Time has been imaginative enough to create costumes which feel realistic and interesting and a little bit medieval and typically fairy tale. They haven't got a hoodie in sight. I want them to use the animated clothing that we see as a jumping off point for a wider, more expansive wardrobe, which we do get in Once Upon a Time. We get a much more detailed look at that character, which is something I really love about the show. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, I think you'll really enjoy my breakdowns on a potential live action Tangled and the live action Snow White. I think they will be right up your street. I will see you next time.